Hello, I'm Tara Hill, and I want to thank you for viewing this 10-minute professional development workshop on preparing counseling students for the National Counselor exam. At the end of this workshop, participants will be able to explain the learning process, compare and contrast the effectiveness of specific study skills, and provide examples of implementing activities using effective study skills. What is important to the process of helping students prepare for the NCE is to first understand the process of learning. Once the learning process is clear, the following information about empirically based learning strategies and study methods will be presented. The process of learning does not just involve encoding, but also recall of the information when we need it to make sense of the world around us. Encoding and retrieval of information are important to learning, but they are not the only skills needed to demonstrate mastery. Being able to access the information and having a conceptual understanding of how to use it works together to deepen and stabilize learning. Unfortunately, many strategies learners report using are ineffective at increasing long-term retrieval. In fact, most of our teaching methods in any one of the 20 or so courses that we teach in the graduate counseling curriculum reinforce the ineffective learning methods. Most educators and students are unaware that they are going about studying all wrong. One such study method is massed learning, or cramming, which initially appears to have positive results because the immediate recall is strong. However, it does not aid in long-term retrieval. Massed learning is teaching one subject each week for a 15-week semester and only requiring retrieval at midterm and final examination periods. It is also when someone only studies the night before an exam. Cramming usually only helps for short-term retrieval, but it can feel very effective to students because the test results are high when tested a very short time after cramming. However, when tested after a specific time period, days, a week, and months later, students who cram or were taught using massed practice strategies have significantly lower test scores when compared to a similar group of students who used empirically based study methods. If counselor educators implement these empirically based learning strategies early on in graduate education and then in every course thereafter, the likelihood of higher pass rates on the NCE and consequential counselor competency also increases. There are some study methods that are ineffective and ones that are supported by empirical literature. So what doesn't work? Evidence shows that reading, reviewing, and rereading leads to familiarity, not learning. This fluency with the material is an illusion of knowing when it really is just familiarity. Traditionally, we are taught to read, reread over and over again to learn the material, but this is not effective. Practice makes perfect. The evidence just doesn't support this old adage. This type of learning is similar to cramming or massed practice. Mass practice is a commonly used teaching and study method and is less effective than other methods you will learn about later. Cramming and massed practice do not aid in long-term retrieval. Learners falsely believe that they have learned material simply because they have fluency with the material. Fluency and exposure is not supported by the empirical evidence as leading to long-term recall. Finally, research demonstrates that any time learning is made easy and fast, it does not result in long-term recall. Again, with cramming, there are short-term increases in scores immediately after the cramming or massed practice session, but long-term, there's a significant decrease in scores between students who have used cramming and those who have used empirically based study strategies. Evidence shows that taking the easy way to learning is what we don't want. Cramming is easy and less time-consuming, but in order to truly learn, it should take effort. Learning is iterative. Practicing retrieval at spaced-out intervals builds stronger neural connections, allowing for information to be recalled more effectively over time. Therefore, learning takes effort, time, and practice. Retrieval practice interrupts the process of forgetting and strengthens the neural connections within the brain. The effort it takes to make the brain retrieve information is a key component to learning. The process of reflection is a method of retrieval. After learning a process, reflecting on it, practicing it, and applying it to different situations through visualization helps to cement the knowledge. Some examples that are empirically based methods of retrieving for learners include self-quizzing, spaced practice, interleaving, reflection, and application of content to different, sometimes real-life situations. Retrieval practice, frequent self-testing of the material, and spaced-out review sessions increases memory and leads to mastery. However, traditionally, educators do not utilize frequent testing as a tool to help students learn. But testing interrupts the processes involved in forgetting. Empirically, when students are repeatedly quizzed on material, they perform significantly better on later exams than students who only review the material. This is known as the testing effect. The type of items may be important in the usefulness of testing as a tool to increase learning. Essay, fill-in, and short answer quizzes are shown to be better tools for learning than multiple choice items. Finally, reviewing missed items on tests and quizzes assists learners in not remembering misinformation. One empirically based method of self-testing is for students to create and use flashcards. These flashcards can be reviewed at varied times, focusing either on the term side and identifying the definition, or the definition side and identifying the term. Students should continuously go through the flashcards and add additional new cards to increase difficulty. In addition to retrieval practice, spaced practice is also empirically supported. I added the picture of the piano lesson as a representation of when we most often used spaced retrieval practice. If you have ever taken lessons of any kind, you may remember that several short practice sessions over the course of a week is better than 1 or 2 long practice sessions per week. The same concept is true for learning content or any other skill, including clinical skills. Interleaving is a method of teaching and studying in which students are introduced and taught concepts and skills that are distinct but related in some way. For counseling students, this could mean pairing 2 different theorists, like Erikson or Freud, to compare and contrast developmental models, client conceptualization, and the interventions that are associated with each theory. The result of interleaving is that students can be helped to see the distinct differences between the 2 theories, which aids in long-term learning. In this slide, you will see 2 forms of massed practice in squares 1 and 2, and an example of interleaving in square 3. Using numbers, the alphabet, stories, visually linking rooms in a house to content and information are ways to use mnemonics. Mnemonics are ways to solidify knowledge and help build additional neural connections. Roy G. Biv is one example of a mnemonic. Each letter represents a color in the rainbow. Red, orange, yellow, Roy, G, green, Biv, blue, indigo, violet. Another example of a mnemonic involves reading music. On the treble clef, the word face labels the spaces in the music staff, while the lines are every good boy does fine. One reason we need to educate students about empirically supported learning methods throughout their graduate education is because deep and stable knowledge results in increased competency and higher pass rates. When counseling students pass the NCE, they become licensed counselors, yet being a competent counselor involves more than just passing the test. Being a competent counselor means applying the information learned during graduate education when working with clients long after passing the licensure exam. The information needs to be readily available for years to come throughout the lifespan of the counselor's career. Students can maintain their learning for long periods by ensuring deep and stable knowledge through mastering these empirically based study methods. You have learned about empirically supported methods of studying that are more effective in increasing test scores. Let's discuss a few ways these methods can be used in your classroom and beyond. Counselor educators can use mixed practice methods during all classes, particularly in courses such as statistics and assessment, in which there is a great deal of terminology, and in skills classes when it involves educating students on effective use of counseling techniques. One recent example of mixed practice method can be illustrated from an extracurricular study session designed to help prepare students for the licensure exam. With the assistance of the counselor educator, students reviewed statistics concepts such as t-tests, ANOVAs, correlations, the bell curve, and hypothesis testing, among others. Several statistics were discussed, and then the students responded verbally to questions such as, what is a t-test for? What is a continuous variable? What statistic is used to evaluate the relationship between two variables? In Phase 2, students reviewed several other statistical concepts and then responded verbally to questions covering the content from the second phase, in addition to content from the first phase. Often, statistics and assessment appraisal information can be discussed together because the two are similarly related. The statistical concepts identified initially were orally quizzed when discussing the assessment and appraisal content. The assessment and appraisal content was verbally quizzed, then the first two sets of statistical concepts were verbally quizzed for approximately a half an hour. 2 hours later, all of the content was again verbally quizzed. The students expressed surprise and gratitude when they recognized that they remembered all of that information 2 hours later. Requiring flashcards as a ticket to take quizzes and exams is another method that counselor educators can ensure the utilization of empirically based methods. Another ticket would be one to leave class. During this exercise, students are asked to make a list of all of the concepts they recall from the discussion, then instruct the students to review their notes and list the information that they forgot. This is a form of retrieval practice. Also, using mnemonics throughout the course content, giving students a cue to recall the information, would model the use of the technique while also encourage its use. Counselor educators can implement these methods and strategies in each class meeting to assist the students in deepening their memory traces and securing their recall and retrieval. This workshop contained information about how to help graduate students prepare for the National Counselor Examination. You have learned that the learning process goes beyond just sensing and encoding, that recall is a significant part of cementing learning. You have learned specific empirically based study skills that increase deep learning for long-term retrieval, such as spaced practice, interleaving, frequent self-testing, and reflection. And you learned ways to implement these strategies in your classrooms throughout the students' graduate coursework by low-stakes testing, requiring flashcards for important concepts, and combining different but related concepts during the lesson plan. I hope you will use these methods in the future throughout the students' coursework. Here is a list of references I cited if you would like to do some additional reading on the information that was presented in the workshop. Thank you for attending.